You were never the prize. You were the placeholder, not the destination, the bridge she crossed to get there, not the choice, the option available while she waited for choice, not the person she wanted, a person who was there when person she wanted wasn't. Placeholder isn't insult. Placeholder is function. Function you served without knowing you were serving it. Role you played without knowing role existed. Position you occupied temporarily while permanent position remained empty. She didn't choose you, she used you. Not maliciously, functionally, not cruelly, practically, not to hurt you, to not be alone while waiting. This is what placeholder means. Means being functional, not desired. Means being practical, not chosen. Means being available, not wanted. Means serving purpose that isn't about you filling space that wasn't made for you occupying position that was always temporary. You thought you were building relationship. You were serving transitional function. Thought you were chosen. You were convenient. Thought you were wanted. You were available when wanted person wasn't. Most men never realize they were placeholder. Never recognize they served transitional function. Never see they were emotional tampao, keeping her stable until real thing arrived. They think they were relationship. They were intermission. Think they were story. They were commercial break. Some relationships exist only to fill space between relationships that matter. Only to occupy time between people who count. Only to provide company between connections that last. You were that relationship, that space filler, that time occupier, that company provider. Not because you weren't good enough, because your function was temporary. Not because you failed, because your purpose was transitional. Not because you did wrong, because your role was placeholder. Placeholder relationships have specific characteristics, specific patterns, specific signs that reveal their temporary nature, their transitional function, their space-filling purpose. First characteristic, she never integrated you. Integration means becoming part of her life structure, becoming woven into her social fabric, becoming assumed in her future planning, becoming referenced in her identity. You were never integrated, never became part of structure, never got woven into fabric, never became assumed in planning, never got referenced in identity. You were adjacent, not integrated, parallel, not woven, separate, not assumed, omitted, not referenced. She kept you in pocket, not in life, kept you available, not visible, kept you accessible, not integrated. Friends didn't really know you. Family barely met you. Future plans vaguely included you. Identity never referenced you. You were kept in compartment labeled for now, in category called temporary, in space marked transitional. Second characteristic, she maintained distance, not physical distance, emotional distance, not space between bodies, space between selves, not separation of location, separation of vulnerability. You got access to her time, didn't get access to her depths, got access to her body, didn't get access to her fears, got access to her surface, didn't get access to her core. She gave you enough to keep you there, didn't give you enough to actually have her, gave you enough to serve function, didn't give you enough to be chosen, gave you enough to fill space, didn't give you enough to occupy heart. Emotional distance in relationship that appears close is signal you're placeholder. Is evidence function is temporary. Is proof purpose is transitional. Third characteristic, she kept scanning. Scanning means looking. Looking means not settled. Not settled means you're not final answer. Not final answer means you're holding space for final answer. She never stopped looking, never stopped scanning, never stopped remaining open to better option, to real choice, to actual desire. You thought her being with you meant she chose you. Her being with you meant you were available while she scanned for who she'd choose. Thought relationship meant commitment. Relationship meant for now, while forever was still being sought. Active scanning while in relationship is clearest signal your placeholder. Is most obvious evidence function is temporary. Is most direct proof purpose is transitional. Fourth characteristic, she maintained optionality. Optionality means keeping options open, keeping doors unlocked, keeping paths available, keeping exits clear. Maintaining optionality means not fully committing, because commitment isn't the function. She never fully committed, never locked doors, never closed paths, never blocked exits, always maintained option to leave, always kept ability to transition, always preserved capacity to upgrade. Maintaining optionality while appearing committed is how placeholders get kept, is how temporary gets extended, is how transitional gets sustained until transition completes. You thought commitment was building, optionality was being maintained, thought future was being created, exits were being preserved, thought bond was forming, escape routes were being kept clear. These four characteristics, lack of integration, maintained distance, active scanning, preserved optionality, these reveal placeholder function, reveal temporary purpose, reveal transitional role, and seeing these after relationship ends reveals you were never meant to last, were never intended to be permanent, were never designed to be final. You were functional until function was fulfilled useful, until use was completed necessary, until necessity passed. But their specific moment placeholder function becomes visible, specific point where temporary nature becomes undeniable, specific instant where transitional role becomes obvious, moment she leaves for upgrade. Upgrade isn't insult. Upgrade is accurate description. She left you for someone she perceives as better, as more aligned, as more desired, as more chosen. Left placeholder for prize, left temporary for permanent, left transitional for final. And how she leaves reveals what you were, reveals placeholder function, reveals temporary nature, reveals transitional role. She doesn't leave with guilt, leaves with relief, doesn't leave with regret, leaves with clarity, doesn't leave with pain, leaves with purpose. Leaving without guilt reveals you weren't hurting what mattered. Leaving without regret reveals you weren't losing what counted. Leaving without pain reveals you weren't leaving what loved. You were function being completed, purpose being fulfilled, role being concluded. Completion doesn't generate guilt. Fulfillment doesn't create regret. Conclusion doesn't produce pain. She leaves cleanly, leaves quickly, leaves completely. Clean leaving reveals you weren't deeply rooted. Quick leaving reveals you weren't structurally integrated. Complete leaving reveals you weren't functionally necessary, beyond function you served. Most painful aspect of being placeholder isn't being left, is realizing how easily you are left, isn't losing her, is discovering you were never deeply held, isn't ending, is recognizing ending was always built into beginning. Placeholder relationships are designed to end, are structured for conclusion, are built for completion. They exist to serve temporary purpose. And once purpose is served, they conclude. They function to fill transitional space. And once transition completes, they end. You were designed to end from beginning, were structured for conclusion from start, were built for completion from inception. Your relationship had expiration date built in, had termination point embedded, had conclusion predetermined. Not because you failed, because function was temporary. Not because you weren't enough, because purpose was transitional. Not because you did wrong, because role was placeholder. But there's deeper understanding of what. Placeholder means she was never yours, means you never had her, means possession was illusion, means claiming was fantasy, means having was misperception. You thought she was yours. She was borrowed. Thought you had her. You were using her time. Thought she belonged to you. She was renting space in your life while owning none of it. Borrowed returns to owner. Used time expires. Rented space gets vacated. None of this is loss because you never possessed, never owned, never truly had. She was always hers, never yours. Was always autonomous, never possessed. Was always free, never belonging. And free people can't be lost because free people were never held. You lost nothing because you never had anything. She left nothing because she never gave anything permanent. Relationship ended nothing because relationship never began anything lasting. Placeholder function means everything was temporary from start. Everything was conditional from beginning. Everything was transitional from inception. Temporary doesn't become permanent. Conditional doesn't become absolute. Transitional doesn't become final. What was designed to end it. What was structured to conclude, concluded. What was built to complete, completed. This isn't tragedy. This is function fulfilling. This is purpose completing. This is design executing. You were placeholder. Placeholder got replaced. This is what placeholders do. This is what placeholders are for. This is placeholder function completing exactly as designed. But there's specific reason why being placeholder is most painful position. Why transitional role is most devastating function. Why temporary purpose is most crushing realization. Being placeholder means you are insufficient from start, means you never measured up, means you are always compromise, always second choice, always for now, never forever, always until, never, always. You weren't chosen, you were settled for, weren't desired. You were accepted, weren't wanted. You were tolerated. Settling isn't choosing. Accepting isn't desiring. Tolerating isn't wanting. She settled for you while waiting for choice. Accepted you while seeking desire. Tolerated you while pursuing want. And settlement ends when choice appears. Acceptance ends when desire arrives. Tolerance ends when want emerges. You think you competed and lost. You never competed. Competition requires you being in running. Being placeholder means you are never in running. We're never being considered for permanent position. We're never option for final choice. She wasn't choosing between you and him. She was using you until him. Wasn't comparing you and him. Was occupying time with you until time with him became possible. Wasn't deciding you or him. Was filling space with you until space for him opened. No competition, no comparison. No decision, just function and function completion, just purpose and purpose fulfillment, just temporary and temporary ending. Being placeholder means you never had chance, means game was rigged from start, means position was always temporary, regardless of what you did, regardless of how you performed, regardless of how you loved. You could have been perfect placeholder and result would be same, could have served function flawlessly, and outcome would be identical, could have performed role optimally, and conclusion would be unchanged, because placeholder doesn't become permanent through performance. Transitional doesn't become final through excellence. Temporary doesn't become forever through perfection. Placeholder is structural position, not performance evaluation. Is functional role, not relationship assessment. Is temporary designation, not permanent potential. No amount of being better placeholder makes you not placeholder. No degree of serving function, well, changes that function is temporary. No level of performing role excellently transforms role into permanent position. You were placeholder, placeholder got replaced. Being best placeholder possible just made you most useful temporary person, most functional transitional relationship, most effective space filler. Being excellent at temporary doesn't make you permanent. Being optimal at transitional doesn't make you final. Being perfect at placeholder doesn't make you prize. Prize is different category, different function, different purpose, different role, different designation, different position. You were never prize, because prize isn't about performance. Prize is about perception, isn't about what you do, is about how you're seen, isn't about how you act, is about how you're valued. She never perceived you as prize, never saw you as ultimate, never valued you as final, never designated you as permanent. You were perceived as functional, seen as useful, valued as temporary, designated as transitional. Perception doesn't change through behavior. Seeing doesn't shift through action. Valuing doesn't transform through performance. How you're perceived is how you're perceived. How you're seen is how you're seen. How you're valued is how you're valued. You can't perform your way into different perception. Can't behave your way into different seeing. Can't act your way into different valuing. She perceived you as placeholder from beginning, saw you as temporary from start, valued you as transitional from inception, and beginning perception determines ending outcome. Start seeing determines final result. Inception valuing determines conclusion status. You are never going to be permanent because you were never perceived as permanent. We're never going to be final because you were never seen as final. We're never going to be prize because you were never valued as prize. This isn't about you failing. This is about her perceiving. Isn't about you being insufficient. Is about her seeing. Isn't about you not measuring up. Is about her valuing. Placeholder function is about her needs, not your adequacy. About her timeline, not your performance. About her transition, not your worth. You served function she needed, filled space she required, occupied time she had. Function got served, space got filled, time got occupied. Function complete, space closed, time passed, placeholder replaced. This is mechanics, not morality. Function, not failure. Design, not deficiency. You were placeholder because that's position she needed filled. Were temporary because that's duration she required. Were transitional because that's function she had. Most men never accept they were placeholder, never integrate they were temporary, never recognize they were transitional. Acceptance requires destroying fantasy they were chosen. Integration requires admitting they were settled for. Recognition requires seeing they were never really had. Destroying fantasy is painful. Admitting settlement is crushing. Seeing never really had is devastating. But fantasy was false. Settlement was real. Never really had was truth. You were never the prize. You were the placeholder, never the choice. You were the available option, never the desire. You were the acceptable alternative. Placeholder got replaced. Temporary ended. Transitional concluded. Function completed. Purpose fulfilled. Role finished. And what was designed to end from beginning ended exactly as designed.